Welcome to the Pittsburgh Dish. I'm your host, Doug. Oh, hi, Catherine.
Doug, hello.
Are we turning the tables today?
That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
Welcome to the Pittsburgh Dish. I'm your guest host, Catherine Montest. Our beloved host, Doug Heilman, has a story to tell, and I've got some questions to ask.
Okay.
Doug, we hear you every week on the Pittsburgh Dish, and you're bringing all of these wonderful stories about what's happening with people in the food scene in Pittsburgh. And there's some interesting things happening for you as well. Let's just kind of talk with a broad brush. What in general is sort of happening for you right now, in addition to the Pittsburgh Dish?
Oh, you're taking my lead question. What do you have going on in food right now? Well, definitely the podcast. I love the response we've gotten. We are just over the 6-month mark. We've had a variety of guests, and I think that's what's really important to me is that we're hearing a lot of different stories from maybe people that haven't been able to tell their story yet, and also some folks that have been around. So, it's a nice mix. But also for me, a lot of folks who have been following my social media feed, they know that I also just wrapped up a national TV show. And that was season 3 of The Great American Recipe on PBS, which was amazing. And I'm still continuing to do usually a monthly cooking spot on local TV with KDKA, CBS Pittsburgh.
So can you maybe tell us a little bit about how you got started being this media cooking food guy?
Yeah, sure. About I guess now 3 years ago, I decided to actually take a pivot from my corporate career. Catherine, you and I know each other because we worked together for quite some time.
Quite some time.
And that was in the telecommunications and wireless infrastructure industry. And we were in the training or the learning and development side of that. And I think it was 2021 when I jokingly told you I was thinking of retiring or at least taking a hiatus from the corporate world. And I was going to explore just some passion projects in food.
Right. And even before that, you'd had a YouTube channel for quite some time that you were regularly posting really fun cooking lessons on.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. In 2014, Greg, my now husband, helped redesign my kitchen in my townhouse. It was looking like video worthy. Also, at the same time, we were getting cell phones and smartphones with much better cameras. And so I had some vacation time off, and I think I set my phone up on like a stepladder, and I recorded a video. It was really interesting to just kind of be a trainer and show what I was doing from a trainery point of view. Of course, I think those videos are very cringy now, and the audio is awful. I didn't know how to share those videos. So I Googled, how do I share a video on social media? And the best thing that I was finding was to create a channel on YouTube. My name, Doug Heilman, was taken on YouTube.
There's another Doug Heilman? How dare he?
There are several, actually. But Doug Cooking wasn't. And so that was the name of the YouTube channel, and also then became the name of any of my other social handles for cooking. So Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Those are all Doug Cooking.
Okay. So how did you make the jump from YouTube self-produced stuff at home to being on KDKA and then eventually the Great American Recipe?
It's been a really interesting journey because I thought, well, let me try YouTube for a year. Let me try and monetize it, see if it can become like a side hustle. It just was a little bit lonely. I'm shooting videos by myself in my kitchen, and then the editing of a video is very long, which is why we haven't gone into editing video yet here for the podcast. I'm trying to avoid it, although maybe someday we'll add video. But I appreciated learning a little bit more about editing and a little bit more about search engine optimization, all those things, building a website, but I really wasn't satisfied. So I think after doing that for just a couple months, I knew I had to get out in the world. And there was a kids cooking camp. It's called Camp Delicious by an organization called Culinary here in Pittsburgh. I had volunteered for that camp a couple of years before. It was coming back after like all the lockdowns had happened and stuff. And so I reached out, and I didn't know if they were looking for volunteers. The leadership had turned over on who was doing the camp, and it was two women, Beth Taylor and Erica Bruce, who are now part of the ownership of Third Space Bakery. And that's how I met them. I reached out and just said, hey, I'd love to volunteer for the cooking camp. And they happily accepted.
That's wonderful. Well, how did the cooking camp then translate or move you on to some of the media platforms where we can find you today?
So there is a connection there. That is interesting.
Okay.
At Camp Delicious, every year they do a bunch of demos, or at least they did. Mm-hmm. And I had met Chris Fennimore of WQED the first time I did the camp. And he was coming back to do a demo for this most current one I did. And he just hung around the rest of the day after he did his demo, which was the Turkey Devonshire. And after that, he just sort of came over to my table with my kids and hung out. I remember offering up, maybe if it wasn't in that moment, it was shortly after. I said, hey, if you're doing any new cooking shows on WQED, I'd love to help behind the scenes. And sure enough, they were doing one in October. I helped out not only behind the scenes, but we ended up cooking meatballs together on the show.
So yum.
That was pretty crazy. That was my first time on TV ever.
That's really cool. That's a great story.
Yeah.
I understand there's a story that you have about a pumpkin banana scone.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's the other way I got on TV locally. I think Chris's show shot in October, and then I also was still doing YouTube videos. So I was looking for a new pumpkin something to do as a video. And some of the folks on the KDKA show, Pittsburgh Today Live, they have a morning monologue, and they were talking about scented candles. And somebody mentioned pumpkin banana scone scented candle. And I remember just remarking how weird that sounded. And then I looked over at my kitchen table and I had bananas and I had my can of pumpkin for my recipe I was trying to think about. And so I just went for it. I'm like, I'm going to make pumpkin banana scones.
It means motive and opportunity.
Yeah. I sent them a picture or something after I was done. And I thought, well, maybe they'll talk about this at the top of the show. And I said something like, you guys inspired me. They just invited me on to make them. And so that was about 2 years ago. And I've been on at least once a month ever since.
That's phenomenal. And, kudos to you for just being open and being out there and sharing what you were doing. And things that sound like really happened very organically around you following your passions.
You know what's funny, Catherine? In our line of business, what we were doing before was a lot of presentation and a lot of training. So I would say we're both primed for speaking in public or being in public, but a lot of times we were given maybe an 8-hour day or a couple of hours to do something in front of a class. But on TV, you're given maybe 10 minutes or maybe 4.5 minutes. But I still found myself thinking like a trainer. How am I going to do this in that 4.5 minutes? Okay, let's bullet that out. I'm going to move here and ask this and have them do that. And I think with the KDKA crew, they love that. And they're like, oh, we definitely want you to come back. So that worked. And it's great how sometimes other parts of your life help you lean into something new that you want to do.
That's an excellent example of how you can really have transferable skills from one area of your life and into another.
Well, you've been doing the same thing with your Fairy Wine Mother and with doing the actual wine demos. You're very good at explaining and educating me and everybody else about what you know, and you're putting your skills to use too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think wine's fun, and I think wine gets kind of a bad rap as being stuffy and out of reach. And if I can just make it easy for people to get into, then more people get to enjoy it.
I'm your audience for that.
Oh, good. Well, let's think about your audience for a moment here.
Okay.
And could you share a little bit about your family history growing up and kind of how you became the person you are today?
Yeah. Okay, sure. Well, I'm a lifelong Western Pennsylvania guy. My family has had a farm of some sort up in Armstrong County since the 1800s. I've done a little bit of research, and I actually think our first ancestors on the Heilman side came to the port of Philadelphia in 1752. And that's a really interesting story because it was a husband and wife and I think maybe 5 kids. And the wife was swept off the boat at sea. So this man showed up with all these little kids in tow.
Oh.
And over the years, made a life. Those kids grew up. Some of them ultimately migrated to more Western Pennsylvania from the east side of PA since then, we've had an ongoing farm that's at some points been a dairy farm. That's what it was for my grandfather. It was called Maple Grove. He would deliver milk to your house.
Aww.
And when my dad and uncle sort of took it over, we converted it to not milk, but beef. And right now, certified Angus beef cattle. And so it's still in operation today. It's small, but it's been going strong for all of this time, which is really great. And so I grew up around that. Grew up around folks having big gardens. And, at the fall time of year or late summer, of course, your next door neighbor would stop by with a bag of zucchini or tomatoes. You just did stuff with it.
Wow. So really food was very much an integral part of how you not just related to each other, but how you related to the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the family and church events and all of that. I'm really lucky that on both sides of my family, my mom and my dad's side, a lot of phenomenal cooks. From my mom, she was one of 10 kids, and they just learned how to cook everything from an early age. My grandma, Wanda, had these 10 kids and a husband. I don't know how you cook for 12 human beings every day of the week, but she did it. What's really fascinating about my mom's side of the family is my grandma adopted dishes in the 1960s to 70s, way earlier than a lot of other families probably did. Italian spaghetti.
Really?
Tacos. Their next door neighbors, the Acevedos, introduced them to tacos and not guacamole, but something they called avocado dip. So they'd buy an avocado and you'd mash it up and mix it with, I think, Miracle Whip or mayonnaise.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, of course. But my mom grew up with that kind of food in her formative years. Food has always been not only important, but it's been good and it's been kind of diverse ever since I showed up on this planet.
Hello, this is Catherine Montest, your fairy wine mother, and you are listening to The Pittsburgh Dish. Doug, who are some of your mentors?
If we talk about in terms of food, I would say, of course, family is there, but I'm of a unique vintage. 1974 is when I showed up. And so when I'm growing up in the 80s and 90s, this is when food on TV really starts to come up. When I'm a teenager, we have cable, and a lot of the cable channels at the time have food shows, not only on PBS, but on Discovery and Bravo and all these other places. So I learned a lot about cooking from TV. And then, of course, when I got to college, the Food Network launched. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like the most amazing channel ever. And this is back in the day when folks were simply teaching you how to cook on that network almost all day long.
Right. Everything was lesson, 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 lesson.
Yeah, it was all a lesson, and there was no cooking competition. That didn't even exist then. You were actually learning from Sarah Moulton or Emeril Lagasse or Bobby Flay when he's super young doing something at a grill beside a lake on a low budget show. But it was pretty amazing. Those shows have gone away, and food TV and entertainment have changed a lot over the years. But I still love food shows that teach you something. So I still love to lean back onto PBS shows. This is why I like Chris Fennimore's show on our local PBS station, because we're lucky we have a locally produced show that actually shows you how to cook a recipe.
And the recipes from those shows are always really rooted in Western Pennsylvania.
That's right. Yeah.
So Doug, tell us, what are some other things about your background that really led you in this culinary direction?
Well, I think as a teenager and, thinking about college, I'm watching these cooking shows, and coincidentally, my mom went back to school for nursing when I was 14. I don't really like blood and that kind of stuff, but nursing seemed to be like a really good idea. And so when I graduated high school, I thought, a dietitian in a hospital, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And I could avoid the whole blood and yuck and all the things I don't like. I ended up going to Penn State for nutritional sciences. I do have a degree in nutritional sciences, although I haven't professionally used it in its entirety. When you asked the question of mentors, I met a lot of other folks that changed my idea and perspective on food through that program. I had a lot of great professors that at the time were helping us understand what the food system looks like, big agriculture versus small farms. It made me feel really good about the kind of farm and the operation that my family has always kept. not being like super big or super industrial and being local. So all that's like really important to me. And even though I ended up working in the wireless industry, as we said with you,
Right.
food always has sort of remained an important aspect of life. What I'm cooking at home, how I'm buying food, how I'm looking at the food landscape. And I think that's why I love the podcast and what we're doing right now, because we're showing more of that local landscape and the diversity that you don't always immediately see.
A lot of those things are really hidden behind the label,
That's
so to
right.
speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether that label is the marquee on a restaurant or the label on a can. Those stories really need to be told.
I agree.
So you've had some pretty big things going on in the food world recently. And earlier you touched on the Great American Recipe with PBS. Tell us, how did that come about and what was that experience like?
It's been almost perfectly a year ago. In the summer of 2023, I had decided that I was going to move away from doing as many YouTube cooking videos. And I wanted to start a podcast, an audio podcast about food. I was doing my research. I had bought some podcast equipment, formed an LLC to treat it like a business. And then one day I got a really strange direct message on Instagram, and I thought it was spam. It was some casting director or casting agent saying, "Hey, there's this show. You should apply for it. Give us all your information." And I'm like, "Nope."
Okay, so you pushed them off.
Yeah.
How did it come back?
Well, so I'm talking to Greg, to my husband, Greg, about it. And he said, "Oh, did you look the guy up on LinkedIn to see if he's legitimate?" And I thought, boy, you're smart. I did not do that. And this guy, Skyler from LA, was legitimate. He had cast for Guys Grocery Games and all these other shows. And I have to be honest, cooking competitions are not something I watch. A cooking competition show has not ever been on my bucket list of something I wanted to do. But I love PBS and I love the cooking shows that they typically have on. So I looked more into this one because it was on PBS. I ended up watching season 2, and it's a little gentler. If someone hasn't watched The Great American Recipe, what I would say is it's really a show about family and culture and place wrapped or veiled around a cooking competition. Yes, we are cooking against each other, and we have 1 hour. You actually need to produce 6 servings or 6 plated dishes. And I can tell you more about why it's 6 in just a second. But it seemed intriguing, and it didn't seem too cutthroat. Greg was super encouraging. He said, he just said, "I think it's just an incredible opportunity. I think you should just go for it." By that, he meant just go for the application, which I did. And I was still so focused on creating a local food podcast. That was in the forefront of my brain, that the whole application and vetting for the TV show was secondary. And maybe that was a really good thing because I never got nervous about it. And that ended up working out because a couple of weeks went by and I had sent some pictures and done a Zoom call. And all of a sudden the producers came and said, "Can you disappear for the month of October into November?" And I was like, yeah. They were like, "Okay, well, you're being very highly considered for the show, so you should plan that you're going to be away."
Oh my goodness.
And not until the very end did they actually say you're on the show. But what they did say is you should watch season 2 and take note of the challenges, and you should practice and see if you can make your dish in an hour, because that's a real thing. You have to have dishes sort of ready in your head that we have the ingredients for. And it really is usually 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. If anyone has watched the show, we're cooking inside a barn. We really cook for that 1 hour. It is pretty frenetic. When you're done cooking, you have 6 plates and they kick you out of the barn. Immediately, the 3 judges go around to every station and they taste one of the plates. They share a plate and they taste it hot. So they know what the dish is like and they make their notes right away. And then they take another plate away for beauty shots, which leaves 4 plates for the camera. And on the camera, they serve the 3 judges and the host those 4 plates.
Okay. So that's where all the 6 plates come from.
Yeah.
I was always curious about that because it takes some time to get through all of the competitors. And how could the food be as good when the last person goes? So at least it sounds like everybody gets a really fair shot at making sure their food gets tasted when it's at its very best.
At its best. That's right. I mean, they definitely on camera are eating some cold bites of food for sure.
Ouch.
But the production process was amazing. My husband works in film, and so I've actually seen some production behind the scenes before, but I've never been part of it. Right. And this was a highly produced show. You know, camera operators and set dressing and all of the culinary team, which was probably the most amazing thing.
What is a culinary team? I've heard that referred to in some shows that I've watched before, but I don't really understand who they are and what they do.
So there is a team of people who are simply in charge of the food, the groceries, and light preparation of those groceries for the show. So they will go out and buy the groceries. They will clean the vegetables for you. They will maybe put your herbs labeled in a zip top bag so you know that that's what that is. They'll take them out of all of the consumer traditional packaging.
Okay.
And they shop everywhere. They shop online. They shop at local stores. They shop at markets. We were actually really fortunate to be on an organic farm for that show.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So one of the dishes that I made, I think it's in episode 2, is a delicata squash soup. And the delicata squash were from the farm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. They do that shopping for you. And I remember one of the first dishes that you made was your Pittsburgh pocket with the Isley's chip chopped ham.
Yes.
And that was a great way to feature Pittsburgh.
We weren't allowed to say some of those brand names like Isley's or Heinz, but definitely, I think if you were watching the show, you knew that we were featuring those products.
Yeah. If you're from Western Pennsylvania, you knew where that ham came from.
I am also so surprised how many folks don't know about strawberry Jell-O pretzel salad.
That blew my mind as well.
Yeah. And that's really more of a regional dish than we realize.
Yeah, that was surprising to me too, because it's so ubiquitous here in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What was one of the most surprising things that happened for you personally while you were doing the show?
Well, I think the most positive thing was meeting the other home cook contestants, my competitors. We became the best of friends, and we still are. We are texting today with each other, and everyone is so genuine. Everyone is so unique. I think a lot of us come to the table not realizing how interesting our story is, but we're so interested in everybody else's, and that's what this show brings out, which is great. I think the other surprising thing about the show is that most of the time, we never had the opportunity to taste our food or anyone else's because it's allocated to the show and to the judges.
Oh, no.
So I'm watching this show. It just aired over the summer. I'm seeing the dishes of my friends for the first time as well as my own. And honestly, I didn't even know what they made because it's so crazy in the moment. I mean, you have 8 camera operators on everybody and you're in your zone. You don't really miss not having that food because everything was catered. It was great. It was a craft service behind the scenes. But now watching it, I'm like, there are so many dishes that I want to make that I have now seen from that show.
That's wonderful.
John's chicken fried steak is one of the top of my list.
Is it?
For sure. So we ended up doing a cool thing to promote the show. If somebody's been listening to the podcast, all of my other castmates have been on as a recipe segment throughout the summer. So if you want to get a bonus recipe from May or John or Tim, go ahead and listen to some of our shows from June to July.
Where can they find those?
Well, Catherine, what a setup. You can listen to the Pittsburgh Dish anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as our website if you just want a web player, and that's www.pittsburghdish.com.
Very good. Doug, what are some of the things you've got on the horizon that are coming up for you?
I think the podcast is really at the forefront of my brain again. I'm excited to be rounding up some new guests for the fall and winter. I think for a while, I was always looking for the new over this summer. And I'm also now thinking about really bringing in some of those folks that have been with us in the food scene for a while. So I'm hopeful not only to keep bringing those new voices in, but hear from some folks that have been in the food scene of Pittsburgh and our region for quite some time and hearing their legacy and how they've shaped our cuisine.
That's exciting. We'll be looking forward to listening to that.
Thank you.
So, Doug, I have to ask one last question.
Oh, I think I know what this is.
This is the Pittsburgh Dish.
Yes.
What is the best dish that you had to eat this week?
Oh, boy. It's funny. I should have known this was coming.
Yeah, you should have.
Well, you know what I have to say, Catherine? We were just at my dear Aunt Jane and Uncle Durwood's house. And of course, she made a spread of food. But the dessert she made is this classic pistachio cake. It has some kind of syrup that's drizzled over top of it, so it's super moist, and it has like walnuts on top. And then she had fresh Chambersburg peaches and homemade ice cream.
Oh my.
All in the same dish. That was definitely the best bite that I've had this past week.
Aunt Jane delivers.
She did.
Doug, thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing your story with the listeners of the Pittsburgh Dish.
Catherine, thanks so much for switching saddles with me and taking the lead on the interview.
Well, you can have the saddle back.
Aw. Thanks again, Catherine.
Thank you, Doug.
If you're interested in checking out the Great American Recipe Season 3, I've noticed it's rerunning now on the Create channel on PBS, or go to pbs.com or the PBS app to stream the show. Thanks again to Catherine Montest for turning the tables on me today, and be sure to give her a follow on Instagram at Your Fairy Wine Mother. That's UR Fairy Wine Mother. Up next, where does the Cheese Queen head to on her day off? Megan McGinnis gives us a delicious briny restaurant recommendation this week. So Megan, you have your own shop and you're doing your own thing. But if you are taking a break and going out to eat, you have any place that's really caught your fancy lately?
You know what, Doug? I just experienced Muddy Waters.
Oh, over in East Liberty?
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like I was on vacation.
Oh.
You know, I walked in there. It kind of reminded me of a seafood restaurant that I love in Key West.
Oh, wow.
And those oysters, stop it. And you can watch them right there. He's shucking those oysters right in front of you.
Like right at the bar.
Right at the bar.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm a bar sitting person. I love sitting at the bar and eating. I guess I grew up that way. I don't know. In the 80s and 90s, that's what my parents did, you know. Now you can't let kids sit at the bar, but they take all the fun out of everything.
Oh.
But I love sitting at the bar, and you get to see just all what's happening behind the scenes. And I will tell you that it was some of the best oysters that I've had in a long time. And then just the jambalaya was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Their drinks are amazing. I had the oyster martini.
Oh, wow.
It was fabulous.
For anyone that's looking, this is Muddy Waters in East Liberty, right along Highland Avenue.
It's delish.
So good.
Hush Puppies, they're different sandwiches they have, just delicious.
Well, we'll have to check it out.
I love it.
Megan McGinnis of the Cheese Queen Pittsburgh, thanks so much.
Thank you, Doug.
Be sure to visit Megan's shop in Mount Oliver and give her a follow on Instagram at the Cheese Queen PGH. Do you dig out the crock pot when you feel that first chill in the air? Heather Abraham gives us a great idea for crock pot bread pudding. Bring on the fall carbs. So when you're cooking at home, Heather, is there like a favorite thing that you just like to make?
I do. And so this was kind of the problem because Frankie and I don't necessarily like the same things. Like I don't like fish, but he loves to eat fish. So he doesn't cook as much of it at home. I love sweets. And when I say sweets, it's not like just chocolate. I'm a Danish girl.
Ooh.
I like the carb kind of sweet. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. So like when you say Danish, you like want pastry and you want like
pastries.
some
I want cinnamon
filling
rolls. I want a cheese Danish. I want it to have dough.
Do you make cinnamon rolls?
I do make cinnamon rolls. There's a recipe that I found years ago. It's a clone of a Cinnabon, and it is so good. But one of the things that I love making, and I don't make it that often because I'm the only one that I think will eat it. My mom used to make a bread pudding.
I love bread pudding.
Yeah. And this one she would put in the crock pot. Again, like as a busy mom and, working at the hospital a lot, this is something that she could arrange the night before and put it in the crock pot, and then it would be ready, a couple hours later. So it's just, I don't remember if she would buy the cinnamon raisin bread, but that's what I buy.
Oh, yeah.
You cube it up, you put it in the crock pot, and then it's eggs and milk or heavy cream. You don't need as much cinnamon and vanilla because you already have that from the bread, but you can put a little bit of that in. And then you let it cook until it's nicely absorbed and cooked through. And then I would make like a little icing drizzle so you can put it on top. It's so good.
Is there
so
butter in? Is there butter in there?
I don't know if you need butter. I can't remember if I put butter in it or not. I don't even know that you need it. I think maybe I do like a cream cheese icing kind of drizzle. That because to me, it's just what you need on top of it. Why not?
Sounds so delicious.
Yeah, so good.
Your mom was like my mom. My mom is also a retired nurse. So we sort of defend for ourselves. We were definitely latchkey kids when we were growing up cooking.
I do think you learn to fend for yourself. You learn how easy it is to make boxed mac and cheese.
Mm-hmm. Boil a hot dog, any can of cream of whatever. I could do that.
Big bologna sandwich girl for a long time.
My sister too. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Heather Abraham, thank you so much for being on the Pittsburgh Dish.
It's really wonderful. Next time we should order some pizza.
We should. Do you have a recipe? Share it with us. Just go to our website at www.pittsburghdish.com and look for our Share a Recipe form. That's our show for this week. We'd like to thank all of our guests and contributors and to Kevin Selecki of Carnegie Accordion Company for providing the music to our show. We'll be back again next week with another fresh episode. Stay tuned.